It gives us comfort, enchants us, and makes us yearn to merge and become one with another person. Love, a powerful emotion, perhaps even the most powerful of all.
Love is happiness, sorrow, jealousy, sexual desire. The kind of love that we humans experience doesn't exist in the same way in other animals. It's very interesting to investigate why love in this intensity only developed in humans.
I think it's important not to reserve the word love for romantic relationships, but to see how it plays out in everyday interactions.
People think of love as a very passive experience. You just fall into love or you fall out of love. And in a way, that's very immature and irresponsible, because if you're trying to make a partnership work with someone, you want to understand a little bit about how love works.
That's exactly what scientists around the world want to find out. What exactly is love? What happens in our hearts and brains? And how can you make love last a lifetime? Love is a basic need. As babies, we experience it for the first time. Parental love is instinctual and unconditional. In the best-case scenarios, mothers and fathers love everything about their babies: the way they look, the way they smell, the sounds they make. For a mother, being close to her child can eclipse all other needs. This is biologically pre-programmed because human babies cannot survive without parental care. For them, parental love is as important as food and drink.
Here's baby 106.
The American psychologist Harry Harlow proved this in the 1950s with controversial experiments in which he separated baby monkeys from their mothers.
Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Harlow wanted to prove the importance of caregiving and companionship. The monkeys were fed from a bottle of milk hanging from a wire mother. A second mother had a face and a fur coat, but no milk. The monkeys briefly went to the milk mother to drink, but spent the rest of their time with their cuddly fur mother. The monkeys that grew up in isolation later showed signs of severe psychological distress. These experiments demonstrated for the first time how vital love, companionship, and nurturing are for infants. Researchers today employ less cruel techniques to find out how important love is for babies. For example, by analyzing their saliva. When a child feels stressed or anxious, the stress hormone cortisol can be found in its saliva. Jonah and her mother Hilke are taking part in a so-called still face test, in which the mother is not allowed to show her child any affection for 2 minutes.
Now comes the still face. The mother turns away, and the child suddenly notices that the mother is no longer responding. And this can be a stressor for the baby. So now we'll analyze how the child responds. We can see that the child feels that too much time has passed without a response, and she's not happy about it. When the mother is responsive to her baby's emotions, then the child knows, if I'm sad, if I'm angry, my mother will be there for me. There are studies that show that there are links between this early mother-child interaction and the capacity to bond in later life.
So our experience of love during early infancy shapes our ability to form meaningful relationships later in life. But there are some mothers who cannot feel love for their babies, for example, because of postpartum depression. The researchers want to find out which factors influence the maternal bond. By using brain scans to determine the blood flow to the reward center in the mother's brain, they can measure maternal love.
Super. When you're ready, we'll start the neurofeedback task.
I'm ready.
Okay, let's start.
The researchers see the same baby photos as the mother lying in the MRI scanner. A gauge shows how strongly the mother's reward center is activated. The mother sees it too, which allows her to assess the strength of her maternal bond. This process is called neurofeedback.
Here we can see that she's able to regulate her emotions and bring them into the green zone. So she's a mother with a strong bond. But for a mother with a weak bond, this is hard. That's where we can use neurofeedback to train brain functions that are hypoactive, meaning not active enough, and give them a boost.
Using the power of her brain, the mother learns how to enhance the parent-child bond and gets immediate feedback. It's a way to practice love.
If she exercises her brain like a muscle, over time this behavior becomes automatic. Maybe the next time she sees a picture of her baby, she won't need a strategy. The bond will kick in instinctively.
We can practice love thanks to the biology of our brains. Our feelings are regulated by hormones and neurotransmitters, and it seems we can affect how they're released.
The idea that you can influence such a complex process like feelings of attachment and bonding by regulating your psychobiology is something I find extremely fascinating.
The substance that intrigues scientists like Beate Ditzen is called oxytocin. It can be administered as a nasal spray, but it's mainly produced by the body itself. Oxytocin is a chemical substance produced in the brain. This neurohormone helps create the feeling of love. That's why oxytocin is also called the cuddle chemical. Via the bloodstream, it carries its biochemical message throughout the body, priming it for affection, tenderness, and trust. Oxytocin was discovered in 1906 as the hormone that triggers labor. Then scientists realized that it was also involved in lactation, breastfeeding. Today we know that oxytocin also plays a role in the maternal bond and in caretaking behaviors. Scientists say that oxytocin regulates our social interactions and thus ensures the survival of our species. The hormone isn't only found in humans, but also in other social animals, including worms, ants, and rats.
Human studying oxytocin in human is like studying of Pandora box. We don't know what is going in the brain of humans. And to understand physiological role of oxytocin, of course, you need the models. And the best model would be social animals.
In these rats, the researchers control the release of oxytocin, with considerable effects on the social behavior of the animals.
If you stimulate oxytocin, they became more social. They interact basically all the time, then the cells, oxytocin cells, release oxytocin.
Sniffing, stroking, cuddling, researchers still know little about what triggers the release of oxytocin. But one thing they do know is that without this hormone, rats would be less social. And humans wouldn't fall in love. Infatuation is like a biochemical explosion, and oxytocin sends lovers' hearts racing. Quite literally, because the heart is particularly susceptible to its effects. Recent studies show that it can even produce the hug hormone itself. But love creates even greater chaos in the brain. Here it flicks so many biochemical switches that acute infatuation actually resembles a psychotic disorder. When it comes to our brains, crazy in love isn't too far from the truth. The neurobiologist Lucy Brown says that love is more than a feeling. Love is a drive, like hunger and thirst. And what's more, love really does make us blind.
It's the front of the brain that is constantly judging other people. Just as you walk down the street, you see someone coming towards you. You may notice their shoes. You may notice how they walk. Is their hair long? How unusual are they? We're constantly engaged in social judgments. People who are in the early stages of romantic love, when we look at the functional activity, shut this part of the brain down. You just don't engage in social judgments of the person you're in love with. You shut off that judgment.
During infatuation, the evolutionarily primitive structures of our brain take over. It's here that all these hormones are produced that influence our behavior so profoundly that love can feel out of our control. It may seem irrational for love to switch off common sense, but for evolutionary biologist Thomas Juncker, the craziness of love makes sense, evolutionarily speaking.
From a biological viewpoint, it's fairly clear. Romantic love developed to benefit our offspring. Think about it. Even in a group of hunter-gatherers, it takes 3, 4, or 5 years for a child to be able to keep up with the group. During this time, the men have to provide shelter and food and so on. And they will only do that if they have an emotional attachment to both the child and the woman.
But why her? Why him? Why are we attracted to some people but not others? At first, it's all about looks. In the blink of an eye, we scan our potential partner and collect information about their age, health, mood, and social status. Men have an eye for women with symmetrical faces, large eyes, full lips, high foreheads, and of course, female proportions. Men usually find young, healthy women attractive. In men, women look for a strong chin, broad shoulders, narrow hips, and quite often, signs of social status. But in the end, the chemistry has to be in sync. And that has a lot to do with scent. Our nose is not as easily fooled as our eyes, as this test demonstrates.
Schön, dass Sie da sind zu unserer Studie. Ich sehe, Sie haben die Proben ja auch schon dabei. Dann können Sie mir die...
This student couple is taking part in an experiment. Everyone brings a T-shirt they wore overnight. The test subjects are now offered 5 T-shirts worn by strangers, plus that of their partner. They have to evaluate which scent they find attractive. People can sniff out other people's immune systems and tend to select a mate whose immune genetics are different and complementary to their own. That way, nature ensures that offspring have a robust immune system. The study confirmed the assumption that heterosexual women tend to sniff out this genetic difference more easily than men, who don't seem to have a nose for it.
For a man, the genetic parameters don't seem to matter. That's not what he bases it on. The typical man likes the smell of his partner because that's a smell that's familiar to him. And interestingly, the longer a man is with a woman, the more he likes her smell.
So it's the woman who gets a whiff of whether the man is a good genetic match or not. unless she's on the pill.
There's an older study from 1995 which showed that women who were on the pill assessed the genetic compatibility of a man differently from women who aren't. Our study confirms this. Women who were on the pill behave similarly to men. This means they don't really care about genetic similarity anymore.
However, scientists can't say whether hormonal contraception influences a woman's choice of partner. But the first kiss does seem to serve as a kind of litmus test. Studies show that women often say that they could tell by a kiss whether their partner was suitable for a long-term relationship. Women seem to be pickier than men, perhaps because of the risks associated with pregnancy and childbearing. During kissing, the partners instinctively exchange biological messages. In a flash, our brain has to evaluate vast amounts of information. How does the other person smell and taste? Are their lips soft or rough? The kiss hard or tender? Happiness hormones flood the body, and through his saliva, the man infuses the woman with testosterone, which increases her desire. Sex is a love booster. Sex hormones reduce anxiety and stress. Blood pressure and heart rate go up, just like during exercise. That's why sex is good for the cardiovascular system. It might also strengthen the immune system by exposing it to foreign body fluids. In short, sex is much more than just reproduction.
What's striking is that humans have sex much more often than they have children, around 1,000 times more often. And this, of course, indicates that sexuality has another purpose. It gives you a much more intense and intimate knowledge of the other person. And later on, the shared desire, the shared pleasure, helps cement the relationship.
Finding the right partner has been a bit of hit and miss over the years, but that might be changing. More and more singles are now meeting online rather than at parties, in the pub, or at work. In the 21st century, dating has gone digital. Bianca and Mark met online and have been together for 14 years. At that time, Bianca was working a lot and didn't have much time for socializing. Mark was working abroad but wanted to return to Germany.
I was living in Hong Kong and I found it hard to meet people there. So I opened an account on a German dating site.
Both of us had just ended long-term relationships and didn't want to repeat the same mistakes. My relationship had failed because we weren't a good match about things like family, children, buying a house, getting a job.
Mark and Bianca met each other because of this man, Hugo Schmale. The psychologist believes that two things in life should be carefully planned: finding the right job and finding the right partner. So he developed a vocational aptitude test and a personality test for an online dating site.
My original idea was not to identify the ideal partner, but to avoid the big mistakes. In life, it's often much better to try and avoid mistakes than to look for perfection.
Based on that principle, Hugo Schmale developed a partnership test. It's a comprehensive computer questionnaire that tries to capture personality traits that play into a good and lasting relationship.
You need to know who you are to know what you want. That's what we call a partner profile.
It includes more than 100 questions about character traits and personal preferences, but also includes questions and images that seem odd at first. For example, the question of whether a broken heart affects your appetite.
Food is passion. Weight loss or gain are related to strong emotional states. Somebody who doesn't lose or gain weight when they're unhappy is not a very passionate person.
According to Hugo Schmale, both partners must be equally passionate, otherwise they're a poor match. But can something as complex as love be predicted like this?
Whether two people hit it off is up to them. We're only increasing the chances of that happening. So meeting someone is digital, but loving is still analog.
Mark and Bianca exchanged messages for weeks before they met for the first time.
We met at the Hamburg airport. I was wearing a really cool, glittering silver suit. Bianca really liked that.
You walked up and kissed me right away. And that was...
Of course. We'd known each other for a long time.
That was a bit much, but okay.
We knew each other so well already.
Our character traits, at least.
I figured if the personal side of things were also a match, if we liked each other's scent and taste and whatnot, it was clear to me that we might end up getting married and having children together. But Bianca wasn't on the same page yet.
Exactly, I wasn't ready yet.
I got ahead of things.
During those first moments, I thought, this is not really what I had in mind. But I went along with it because I knew that our personalities were a match.
Today, Mark and Bianca are happily married and have 3 children. So in their case, the algorithm certainly seems to have helped them find a match. Scientists are just beginning to study online dating and its impact on love, like sexual therapist Melanie Büttner.
When I meet someone in a club or at a dinner party with friends, I notice a lot of things about that person. I see how they act, how they move, their facial expressions. How do they speak? How do they smell? I perceive them with all of my senses on all channels, maybe even before we talk to each other. And that's what's so different about online dating. That's why we say that online dating profiles reduce 3-dimensional people to 2-dimensional displays of information.
Somewhat ironically, despite the rise of online dating, the traditional model of marriage seems to be enjoying a kind of second wind.
Marriage is still in. The number of marriages has declined since the 1950s, but since the turn of the millennium, the number has remained constant. The number of relationships that end has declined in recent years. This means that the long-term relationship as an institution, as an ideal, is still very important to us.
But that's not true for every country. In Japan, for example, 21st century lifestyles have given rise to a new trend. Many Japanese women fantasize about the perfect wedding, but what they want is the celebration, not the spouse. That's the idea behind solo weddings, a wedding starring only the bride and no one else.
This is the right time for me now. I'm the right age. I don't want to have to wait to wear a wedding dress. I can do it now, if I like. And it's important to me. I don't necessarily have to have a husband. It's not like my soul won't rest in peace if I don't end up finding the right partner.
Studies show that half of all Japanese under the age of 30 have never had sex or romantic partnership. In Japan, love has fallen out of favor. Maybe that's because a relationship can become routine. This usually happens after about 2 years. Emotional turmoil turns into tranquility. Some couples separate, but others enter a new phase of love. Support and security become more important than grand passion.
Kannst du davon später erzählen? Ich muss mich kurz konzentrieren.
Love might not be as exciting anymore, but it becomes healthier. People in functioning relationships are sick less often and eat a more balanced diet, although they don't necessarily eat less. Still, studies show that a stable relationship helps protect against cardiovascular disease. Touch helps reduce stress and lowers the heart rate and blood pressure. And kissing might even help with hay fever. Once again, it's oxytocin that helps account for many of these health benefits. Administered to couples as a nasal spray, oxytocin even helps them argue less.
We asked couples to argue in the lab, and oxytocin actually influenced their behavior. They behaved more positively in these conflicts. Our latest research focuses on these positive effects. Conflicts aren't the only thing that determine the quality of a partnership, but we do want to investigate whether this might be used as a kind of intervention. How can our behavior influence our oxytocin levels, then perhaps influence things like wound healing or stress levels?
In a recent study, scientists investigated whether oxytocin makes wounds heal faster. First, they inflicted small burns on the forearms of both partners. Normally, burns like this take a week to heal. So, do they heal faster when a loving partner is at your side? And can oxytocin spray speed up healing? One partner receives oxytocin, the other a placebo. A week later, the result is eye-opening. The oxytocin spray appears to have made the man be more nurturing towards his partner, and her wounds healed more quickly. This might be because oxytocin reduces stress levels. The scientists regularly tested the participants' saliva for cortisol. It's a hormone that our bodies release in response to stress. But oxytocin seems to interfere with this mechanism.
What the data shows is that when the study participants took oxytocin, their cortisol levels were lower. And that could be the reason why oxytocin has an influence on wound healing.
So, love can actually have healing powers. The biochemical benefits of oxytocin can make our lives not only happier, but also healthier. But love can also hurt. The loss of love or the loss of a loved one can cause profound grief and emotional suffering. Heartache can even lead to what is known as broken heart syndrome, and it can even be fatal. The symptoms are similar to heart attack. The affected person suddenly suffers heart failure. Women after menopause are most at risk. Elisabeth Pompili almost died of broken heart syndrome. A year ago, she lost her partner. His death brought back memories of a terrible accident 20 years earlier.
In 1998, an airplane went down in Halifax. My daughter was working as a flight attendant on that plane. It was a terrible shock. It was so sudden. I had to keep going because my husband was totally devastated. Our daughter was gone, so I had to be very strong.
Shortly after the death of her daughter, her husband passed away due to cancer. And when Elisabeth's new partner died a year ago, her heart finally broke.
I loved my daughter, I loved my husband, and I loved my partner. And then I lost all three. I'm not the only person in the world who's lost someone, but then you have to try to cope.
But her heart was unable to cope. When she was admitted to hospital, her doctors thought she was having a heart attack. But the test results came as a surprise. Elisabeth's coronary arteries were not blocked. Her heart had stopped working normally for a different reason: broken heart syndrome. The disease causes a kind of cardiomyopathy. The heart muscle doesn't work the way it should. As a result, the heart no longer pumps enough blood into the body.
Broken heart syndrome is a disease where emotions, be it love, positive or negative emotions, first arise in the head and then affect the heart. We don't know exactly why. We believe that there's a stress response that originates in the brain and then affects the heart. And this probably triggers some kind of microcirculation disorder, which then causes this characteristic ventricular dysfunction.
Today, Elisabeth Pompili's heart is functioning normally again, and she's even found a new love.
My partner and I are at an age where we both know that something could happen to either one of us at any moment. But we tell ourselves to enjoy life. I don't ask myself what will happen tomorrow or the day after. It's no use. You have to live life and enjoy each day as it comes.
The daily grind often puts love to the test. Arguments and complaints replace desire and tenderness.
Quatsch nicht!
Always the same old fights over the same old things.
Da, wo siehst du denn da noch Flecken?
Hier.
Ja, dann mach das weg da und dann tu rein da in den Sieb.
In Seattle, a team of researchers are investigating such conflicts. At the Gottman Institute's Love Lab, Carrie Cole helps couples to better manage their disagreements. The psychologist has helped hundreds of couples and remains convinced that love can last a lifetime.
Oh, absolutely. My parents were married for 58 and a half years when my father died, and he was her knight in shining armor and she was his princess. That's the way it always was. So I do believe in that. I do believe that it's important. The way that we speak to people and treat people is very important.
Lori and Jeff have been together for more than 20 years.
Nice to meet you, Jeff.
But they feel that the deep love and passion they once shared has started to fade.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today.
For the next 8 hours, Carrie Cole will observe Lori and Jeff's interactions. Lori and Jeff are being wired up, and then they'll have a conversation about a topic that tends to result in a conflict. Electrodes will record how strongly they react to each other, how angry they become, how stressed they feel. Carrie listens and observes. She'll use the data to analyze the argument and compare it to what she could see in the couple's facial expressions. She's looking for signs of annoyance and contempt. Handling disagreements in a healthy way is a challenge for all couples.
I don't know why I'm digging my heels in here, but I'm digging my heels in. And Jeff, you said, I can't remember what we were fighting about. It was probably nothing. And you're absolutely right, because couples fight about nothing. But underneath that nothing was a real important something for each one of us. And that's what we need to get to.
Often the actual topic of disagreement is less important than how the couple handles conflicts. Couples in distress tend to display what Carrie Cole calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt.
When I see any of the 4 horsemen, those are the 4 killers of a relationship. If there's no intervention in those situations, those couples likely won't make it. So contempt is the sulfuric acid for a relationship. So that's the deadliest of them all. And when I see that, it's a really bad sign. You know, and somebody's talking and someone's contemptuous of them, they might school themselves from rolling their eyes, but they'll still go. And then there are some people who are just highly contemptuous and their faces are kind of set that way.
Lori and Jeff watch the video of their argument and identify a few of the 4 horsemen.
I have done that. There are some beds upstairs. But they shouldn't be upstairs. I'd like to get that.
75% of the time or more that we are going to be missing each other, we're going to be grumpy, we're going to be tired, and we're not the master of our emotions in those particular moments in time. That just means we need to repair. We need to be saying, I'm sorry, that came out wrong, or I need a break, or I'm feeling grumpy right now.
For Lori and Jeff, this is just the start of their therapy, but the first day has given them hope that not all is lost.
It helps me feel more, in some ways, that flicker of a connection comes back when we talk about it. It does peel away some of the layers that have built up over it of just feeling bogged down and weary.
And sometimes it's good to have a little help thinking through how you can stay close and be a team and not grow apart.
However, many relationships simply suffer from not enough sex. Erotic attraction generally decreases during the first 5 years. This is completely normal, but if the sexual desire for a partner disappears completely, then often love disappears too.
I often see people who complain about too little sex, or too much, or that their sex life just isn't fulfilling for them. All of that's possible, and what's right is different for every individual and every couple. Once a month might be enough, or once a week, or 3 times a week.
Love can exist without lust, but most couples would like to keep the passion of the early days alive. For sexual therapists, there's a simple reason to keep the fire burning. Nothing releases as much oxytocin as sex with your partner.
Sexuality has the potential to evoke incredibly intense emotions and feelings in both men and women. Of course, this varies greatly from person to person, but when a couple has sex, it strengthens their bond and is emotionally rewarding. They experience pleasure, closeness, and emotional support.
Oxytocin not only makes couples behave more lovingly towards each other, it can also improve their sex life. Tim Krüger conducted a study in which he gave couples oxytocin.
Oxytocin can make a difference, but it doesn't trigger sexual desire. The couples in our study said that it affected the quality of their sexual interaction. It was more intense, a little more intimate. But they didn't say that they suddenly experienced more sexual pleasure. It's certainly not a love drug.
Perhaps nature didn't intend for us humans to live together as couples for all of our lives, but only until our offspring were grown. Today, however, we want to make love last forever. Maybe one day this will become easier, thanks to a pill that can keep love blossoming. Brian Earp is a bioethicist who wonders whether it would be right to give a pill to couples who want to reawaken their love.
The more we learn about the neurochemistry of love, the more we'll have the opportunity to intervene in that neurochemistry. And no one had really made that point before. If we understand these systems with biotechnology in the future anyway, we might be able to actually modify the systems. And then we'll have something like real-life love drugs, and we'll have to decide the ethical implications of that.
Brian Earp thinks that at times, such a pill could work wonders.
When we touch our partner, or we have a massage, or we kiss, or we hug, or we have an orgasm, these are things that radically boost our oxytocin levels from the inside. But some people have a hard time with touch in their relationship, for example. Maybe they don't find it naturally easy to have the sorts of experiences that would allow oxytocin to release naturally. Well, then you might think maybe an artificial supplement of oxytocin could help people in this kind of situation.
Whether with medication or without, the question of how to make love last will keep love researchers busy for some time to come. But one thing is certain: love is precious. We have to handle it with care and breathe new life into it every day.
Zu lieben.
Loving is vital. It's something beautiful and quite individual.
Und ganz individuell.
Well, first it's romance and then it's fun. Okay, so you have to do things to keep your romance alive and exciting.
We can live without love, but life is better with it.